Abadi Ghani, everyone. This is Professor Rahh, Professor Emeritus, California State University of Long Beach. Um, Professor Emeritus, California State University of Long Beach, Africana Studies Department. We're going to get right into the program. We want to welcome you here to the Conscious Corner Community Forum, and that deals with courageous questioning and deep thinking with regards to what's happening in the African community. We have a 2-point program today. We have Brother Asar Jubal from Cuba that will be discussing repatriation and as a alternative, as a solution. And we got Brother Omar Kuumba Montgomery, president of the NAACP and of Aurora, California, and director of diversity at Cherry Creek Unified School District, one of the biggest school districts in Colorado. But at the same time, as he was saying, he's going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then we're going to get to Jubal about repatriation. All right, go ahead, Kuumba.
First of all, just want to say thank you all, and it's good to see Brother Jabal, who is a friend, mentor. Learned a lot from the time I was able to spend with Jabal, and it's just good to see you, brother. And of course, pops, thank you for this opportunity. And I'll be brief because I know that we have two different shows, and just want to get to some of the points you were earlier asking about this term DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And before we even get to DEI, we have to also remember that all these terms come on the struggle of Black people. Whether if we're talking about affirmative action, um, whether if we're talking about Brown versus Board of Education, and these are some of the landmarks that sort of set up what DEI is, which I put DEI in three different categories: the positions of DEI, the practice of DEI, and then the impact of DEI. And all three of them are similar but yet different in their own unique way. When we began to talk about the 70s, especially during the education movement, you begin to have what you call your educational equity programs that was sort of answering the call for affirmative action when we began to talk about education. Affirmative action was in the workplace, affirmative action was in schools, and affirmative action also played somewhat of a role when we began to talk about how police abuse cases were addressed during the 70s and during the 80s before you ended up having your consent decrees and things of this nature. Then, as you begin to fast forward, some of that language began to change because at first, when people began to talk about affirmative action and they began to talk about educational opportunity programs, most people was talking about the relationship within race between Black people, Black infrastructures, and white infrastructures. As these terms began to grow, you begin to have more groups included. You begin to have your Spanish speaking groups included. You begin to have your Asian American groups included. You begin to have, of course, white women included. So then this began to broaden those terms. It began to go from educational opportunity, affirmative action to, for those who really remember these terms, multiculturalism, cross culturalism. If you remember during the 80s and 90s on your campus, how many people had a cross cultural center or a multicultural center on your campus? And they were trying to separate this binary of it really being an issue related to racism, where racism was prohibiting Black people for being able to either get in companies, access education, and access some of these institutions. So now other groups were beginning to say, hey, we face some of the same issues. So these terms began to include other groups. As we get towards the 2000s, then you began to see the LGBTQ2A plus communities beginning to be added to some of these practices. So then we get to, I'm just fast forwarding a lot of history. Then we get to these three areas of DEI: post George Floyd. This is when they began to get their popularity. They were there before George Floyd, but when people saw George Floyd with the knee on his neck and how he died, there was this overwhelming amount of support for DEI programs, where they began to invest millions. Companies, Fortune 500 companies, began to invest millions in DEI programs. And let's begin to think about these three areas I talked about earlier. The positions. First, the positions came up. And by the way, just to give you some brief statistics, when we talk about DEI positions, you would think it would be mostly people of color that were in these positions. 56% of DEI positions were white. Let's start there. 56% of DEI positions, either in companies and schools or wherever, were headed by white people. Black people only had 19%, followed closely by Hispanic 13%, followed by Asian 10%. Women had 77% of the positions and men had 29%. That's just the position. But because you had the position doesn't mean the practice was being carried out. Some people just had the position in their HR so that they would hire like former lawyers and things of this nature to make sure they didn't get sued and to make sure they put in some basic practices to make sure they wasn't violating people's rights. So many of these positions were held in HR. Then some companies said, hey, we want to make sure that our people, I want you to think about this term belonging. We're going to come back to that in a few seconds. This term called belonging. We want to make sure that our people belong and feel like they belong. So what did they do? They started affinity groups. You have like Comcast that have their Black affinity group or have their Latinx affinity group. You have other companies that have those affinity groups. Even the IRS, I don't know about now because of this new administration, had a Black affinity group. I actually spoke at several of their Black History Month programs. Then we began to talk about, you have the positions, the practice, where the practice, we want to have this concept of belonging, where everyone feel like they can be heard, where they can show up as their authentic selves. Then we talk about the impact. Many companies began to do research on their DEI initiatives and found out that they had a broader reach to more consumers and they were making money. They began to see revenue go up. They began to figure out they were reaching out to communities they hadn't reached out before. And not just for sales, but also for talent. Starting to recruit at HBCUs, starting to invest in HBCUs, starting to go to organizations that's been around for years, like the National Society of Black Engineers, connecting with the Urban League to recruit talent. We're connecting with the NAACP to recruit talent. And so you begin to see not just Black people or other people get jobs in DEI positions, they were beginning to recruit talent from all these different areas of within their company, especially in the medical field. They started going to Xavier. For those who do not know, Xavier in Louisiana is one of the top schools for preparing doctors. Paying for these kids to go to medical school. You had people paying for kids to go to law school because they realized the talent was there. But there still were people who had the stereotype that if a Black person was hired, that they wasn't really talented. It was a DEI hire so that the company can feel better and not have protests and this, that, and the other. So you still had that stigma with DEI. Let's fast forward. Now we got this new administration. And at the height of DEI between 2020 and 2023 was when you had the majority of your DEI programs that were being funded. Just since this new administration was elected at the federal level, there has been a 17% drop in DEI positions, DEI initiatives, and companies investing in DEI. Let me give you an example. In the city of Denver, we have one of the largest Juneteenth celebration. It is a 2-day Juneteenth celebration. And within that 2-day Juneteenth celebration, Brother Rashaki, thank you for bringing this up. Within that 2 days, companies have pulled out their funding. So this year, Juneteenth in Denver is only a 1-day celebration. When it was a huge jazz event, people were coming, thousands of people would come out. There's a parade, and generally it was a 2-day event, whole weekend of festivities. But companies have pulled their money back, pulled their money out. It's no longer a 2-day event. As I begin to wrap up, because I also want to get to some questions and make this more of a conversation than me just lecturing, I want to also bring up that when we talk about DEI, our grassroots community also added another term. It was JDEI, justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the reason why that term justice was brought in was because, yes, people had the position, but what was the practice and what was the accountability? And that term also comes into play when we began to talk about the consent decrees with police. If you recall, a little bit prior to George Floyd and after George Floyd, there were federal consent decrees on police departments that had issues with police abuse or abuse of power. What is a consent decree? A consent decree is an agreement between that city or that municipality and the federal government on what changes is going to be needed that they're going to make within their public safety system to make sure that these practices of abuse do not take place. That included your DEI trainings, your de-escalation trainings, and things of this nature. In the world of Colorado, we have a consent decree, but it's not a federal consent decree. It's a state consent decree. So our consent decree is still in place for the next year and a half because it was done by the state and not the federal government. So with that, you begin once again. I'll end as I began. The 3 areas of DEI: the position of DEI, the practice of DEI, and the impact of DEI. I said I was going to circle back to this term called belonging. Companies are beginning to change their DEI names and language to language using the term belonging. Are we making sure that all of our employees feel like they belong? You're beginning to see belonging surveys, how people feel about the culture climate, how people feel about are they being heard? Are they feeling good about their current position? Are they feeling good about how the company promote people and things of this nature? So you're going to see a change in language as this new administration began to put pressure on DEI. How do you fight? How do you fight this? One, as Black people, we've been fighting this for a while. Once again, we only make up 19% of the DEI positions. Let's understand that. What we do in our communities is, one, if y'all recall, Target got rid of their DEI positions. The churches went out and protested. Target lost billions of dollars, and their revenues within the stock market began to drop. Those same pastors, where I think they could have took the step forward further to really make this revolutionary, wasn't about an anti-Target move, but what about the Black businesses in your community that you could have uplifted with that same type of energy? The same things you can get at Target, you can get online through Black influencers who have a direct line to Walmart and some of these other companies that's going to go back and hire people that look like them. And you see that dollar, for those who remember Brother Muhammad Nasruddin, how many times that dollar can circulate in your community so that your community could benefit from it. So the next step is, yes, you can protest all these companies that's getting rid of their DEI initiatives, but what's the next step? Have to invest in Black businesses, have to begin to start your own education system where Black kids continue to learn about their Black history. It's not going to happen in school the way it used to be. And there was questions about how it was implemented in the first place when we were talking about Black history, African history, and our contributions to society. Pops, I go back to you. What was the revolutionary act during the 80s and 90s when you had your free tutoring program? You said, I'm not going to wait on the school system. I'm going to start a free tutoring program so that kids can learn how to read and learn how to get through school. Our faith-based organizations need to turn Sunday school into a literacy class so that kids can learn how to read, learn about their history, and learn about themselves. That's just a brief overview. Happy to take any questions, and hope I addressed many of the things that we were talking about prior to the discussion starting. You on mute, Pop. You still on mute, Pop.
Can you hear me now?
Hear you, Pop.
Okay. You're a director of diversity for Cherry Creek. What is your job description and goals?
Well, our office is called the Office of Equity, Culture, and Community Engagement. And that's been the name of our office since I've been there. My position is Director of Community Engagement. I was last year, I was Director of Equity, Culture, Community Engagement. Our job is to make sure that schools within a school district are making sure that their equity goals, each school has equity goals, which is part of our core values in the district, that they're meeting their equity goals. And if they're not, what can we do to support them? Especially if the data is showing that there's inequities within your school. So that's the primary focus of our job.
Okay. Brother Ernest, you have any questions?
No, I'm still trying to digest this. There's a lot of information there.
All right, Mshinda.
I was not aware of what was going on, because I'm not really out in the community, because my life now just revolves around full-time caregiver for my wife. So I don't really get out and, listen to programs like this, give me an opportunity to find out what's going on. So
okay, good, Ernest. What about you, Mshinda? Are you?
Yeah, I'm there. No, I don't have any. Just a comment I heard him mentioning about consent decrees. New Orleans, NOPD, they've been under federal consent decrees for 10 years or more, through the compliance issues and federal rights issues and things like that. So, it's an uphill battle. Struggle continues. Appreciate the brother's work. As usual, he's come on before, supporting, and that's it. But I don't have anything else to add.
All right.
Yes, the key point the brother was making about those folk who are in some of these corporate positions believing that they belong. And there lies the flaw with the DEI. The people who are in charge of these companies are just clueless on employees other than the white male. And these young people that they go get from the HB, historically Black colleges, or wherever they get the non-white males from, to put into these positions to train so that one day they could represent the company, don't believe that they are a part. So you start out with a larger percentage of non-white males starting in this position. But when you get finally to the executives, there's hardly any Black folk there, and it's all white males. So, my brother, how do we go about informing these people who are in charge of the company, those who care to have equity? Of course, there are those who don't care to have equity that are in charge, and they really could care less about being a good leader for the company and improving its bottom line and also its diversity. How do we go about getting the message to them on how to deal with these DEI workers that are non-white?
First of all, I want to thank you for your question. And I think that has been, it's a hit and miss for different companies. There are some companies who do or some organizations, I just don't want to put it on corporate organizations. There are some organizations that do a good job in what I call onboard this position, provide support for this position. I think people solely have this in their HR department, where it's only to protect the company from lawsuits, and they're not worried about if a person belongs. They just want them to belong enough to prevent from getting a lawsuit. But now that that has even changed, that those protections for workers are beginning to erode, it's going to be about, does the company just have the will? Does the company want to make sure that these people in these DEI positions belong? And there's several different ways to make that happen. One, it starts out with your hiring practices. Is your hiring practices looking through a lens of equity? Is your hiring practices making sure that you have a broad enough scope that you're not just hiring the same people that look and sound like you, and you're trying to push your company? There's a lot of consultants, which many of them are getting laid off or losing their contracts, that help companies achieve that goal, because many of them have blind spots. Hey, I was raised in Iowa. I was raised in Nebraska. Hey, I was even raised in the urban community, but I didn't connect with Black people. I didn't connect with Spanish speaking people. I didn't connect with my Asian American brothers and sisters, but I have the will to take my company to the next level. So I want to bring someone in to make us put in the best practices to make that happen. We have to also understand there's another alternative. This is also a good time and opportunity for us to invest and start our own corporations. To begin to, this is an opportunity where African countries are beginning to say, hey, if you have the money, if you have the resources, and you have the group, let's begin to have that global investment where we can work with each other and begin to start our own companies. And I think that that's part of it. One, the companies that are headed by people that have the will, and two, how do we begin to invest in our own companies where you ain't even got to worry about that issue?
Okay. Brother Mshinda, Rashaki, you have any questions?
No, no questions. Just appreciate Brother Omar coming on and giving us this information.
What, son, my
Yes, sir.
understanding of DEI is diversity, meaning that your company or public employment agencies, maybe schools, social workers, as well as private corporations,
Yes,
should
sir.
have work places that represent the whole of the communities that they are in, like diversity. That they should have diversity within their workplace and educational institution. Now, that's not everywhere, because there's some states and some communities that's just all white. You understand? Ain't no Black people, ain't no Latinos and all that. People be thinking that because they live in urban areas that there's diversity everywhere. But most places in this country are rural, small, and predominantly white. And you understand? So they don't have, they can say they following it. It's just that we're dealing with Dutch, Polish, and Irish, and we're not dealing with race. We did with ethnic religious diversity. Second, that equity. Diversity, equity. Equity is a process by which you
Yes.
meet that goal, that you develop policies and practices that that does not discriminate against diversity. You know, because see, like when you get with civil rights, there's two parts of affirmative action. One is de facto and one is juris. One is based on law, the other one is based on tradition and custom. And then the second is that you can't just charge people with discrimination under the jurisprudence. You have to show years of discrimination and years of policies that prove that this company was deliberately discriminating, such as marking applications or such as creating applications and tests that they know that diverse people wouldn't be able to pass and things of this nature. So that's why you had what they call affirmative action. That's why Lyndon B. Johnson told James Foreman when he met with him, because they weren't asking for no affirmative action. They were just asking for just an opportunity. And he said, no, we need something affirmative. And that's where the term affirmative action came from. But again, getting back to inclusion, inclusion means that they don't feel that that the people that they're working with don't treat them as if they're especially there, that they didn't get there on their qualification. For instance, when you develop a process, an application process, all you're looking for is fairness. And you're screening in the application pool of hiring, whoever's screening the applications, whoever's interviewing is not biased or racist, or just, you know, dealing with nepotism or some type of cronyism. That they open it up and have hiring practices that will receive all applications equally, because before they didn't. You understand what I'm saying? And then the other thing is inclusion means that the person that got the job feel that they belong because of their qualifications, and the person that is doing the hiring let people know this person was the best qualified person. That's why they got the job. What we was dealing with people had the qualifications but didn't have the job. They said, when you have too much qualification, they say, well, you overqualified. You don't need this job. and things of this nature. But how you respond to that? Kuumba? And then we get to Jubal.
One, everything you're saying is 100% true on the HR and law side. When you begin to talk about the policies, when you began to talk about the laws and the different byproducts of affirmative action that has speared off into workplace discrimination based on age, based on all what you call the groups identified by the federal government. Yes, you're 100% correct, but it also depends on when you talk about DEI, it's about how that company is implementing these things outside of the law. So you're talking about, for example, when you said diversity, for some companies, diversity isn't the diversity within their company, it's the outreach they do in the community. That's just their concept of DEI. If I give to the NAACP, if I give to the Urban League, if I give to some of these other organizations and I give a few scholarships and I do a few internships, then I've met what I perceive my company goal for diversity. Equity to them is making sure that the people who are there are treated fairly according to their workplace policies. That doesn't mean that they have an emphasis on hiring a diverse group. That means that we want to make sure that everyone here is treated fairly, access to promotions, that application process is fair, and things of this nature, and inclusion. Inclusion can mean so many different things to a company. Is inclusion meaning that, hey, we want to make sure that we have diverse voices when we're making a decision? Or do we just want to make sure that we have the proper faces and the proper look when we're out shopping for grants and things of this nature, and we say that our company is diverse. So for each company, there's a different definition and a different approach to DEI. But the main thing is when DEI is housed in your HR department, then it addresses every single thing that you just said. When your DEI is separate from your HR, then you're talking about the culture climate within the organization in achieving diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Appreciate that, son. Well, thank you for being here. You know, I hope you stay on here, Asar.
Oh,
And,
yeah, my good brother.
okay, but we got another portion, Brother Asar Jubal, here, historian, former historian and author of 3 major writings, Black Truth, Black Revelations, and The Conspiracy of Silence. And one of his positions is that Black people need to prepare to leave this country to a better and more comfortable country by what he called repatriating, either to Africa or someplace where they can get treated better or that there's better conditions. So, Asar, you want to go ahead and take that over?
Yes, Omar, thank you so much for that presentation. It's just a part of what we used to call way back when I first entered Black Studies in 78 or 79, part of the struggle. The struggle continues, doesn't it? So I just want to address this struggle in general and throw up or offer an alternate way of facing the problem, this ongoing, continuing, never-ending problem, and where it comes from, why it's here, and why we, one step forward and then 2 steps back. Sometimes it seems, or 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It seems like it's just never ended. So, I'll be 88 this year. And after, I was born, 2 years before Hitler invaded Poland. And in all that time, we've gone from one fascist dictator to another one. Right here or in the US, at least one who is a wannabe fascist dictator. So, we say the struggle continues. It's not easy at this age to just wrap off the top of my head. I don't possess the intellect and the knowledge and the memories of the recall factor of Amin Ra. I'm just hugely impressed, especially when he did his programs pertaining to the history of Black studies. So since I don't possess any of those qualities, I've been, for the last a few weeks, writing down my thoughts, giving long consideration to different.
You froze, Jubal. Go ahead.
And
Hello?
then somebody's talking?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I just want to read this statement and then ask everybody what they think about it. So if we follow the daily goings on of this Trump administration and their proxies in Israel, we get a good look at the mentality of white supremacy and its made up Christian fantasy, which proclaims a holy land and a chosen people, and at the same time refers to all people of color, whether from Africa, Asia, or the Americas, as heathen, uncivilized, uncultured.
You froze, Jubal.
Sorry, say
Go
that
ahead.
again.
We can hear
Okay.
you now, but we missed some of it.
Oh, sorry. Let me go. Let me repeat. It's just a sentence. I said, if we follow the daily goings on of the Trump administration and its proxies in Israel, we all know what's going on over there today. We get a good look at the mentality of white supremacy and its made up Christian fantasy, which proclaims a holy land. That's what that whole thing in Israel and Palestine is all about, because they proclaim a holy land and a chosen people, and refers to at the same time people of color, whether they from Asia, Africa, or the Americas, as heathen, uncivilized, uncultured, evil, pagan, idol worshippers. And then their Jehovah or God has authorized them to either convert or exterminate. We see this playing out today with the Trump edicts against the history of Black people in this country, and its attempts to erase it from school books, libraries, and museums, and especially from the school books. And its attempt to erase it just in general from every aspect of the life here in this country. But even before Trump, their dictionaries and encyclopedias, and more recently, these
Rose again.
It's the connection, Pop.
Mm-hmm.
You back?
Yeah, go ahead.
Are we in?
Yes, go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So I said, even before Trump came along, we had the problem of these dictionaries and encyclopedias, let alone their history books. And more recently, these search sites such as Wikipedia and Google, etc., others, they have consistently misinformed and misdirected in a continuing effort begun some 2,000 years ago to disconnect Europe from Africa. For all this time, they have deluded themselves into thinking that the Greeks, Romans, Hebrews, Anglos, Germans, Scandinavia, etc., were superior to Africans, Asians, and all people of color. So insistent are they in perpetuating this ostrich-like view of world history that they now employ as factual the constant denial of truth provable along every line of discipline of culture, history, science, and especially genetics. Europeans, as white people from their inception or creation, around 1500 BC, or just about 3,500 years ago, have constantly warred, lied, attacked with immoral brutality anyone and anything they encountered who or that dared to challenge their self-appointed dominance of their realm, no matter where they wandered. This penchant for historical and religious fiction is fueled by an indelible absence of melanin in both the skin and the brain, which leaves them genetically inferior to people of color, which then requires their constant pronouncements that the very opposite is true. And so, even to this day, they seek to control the world of color. Just like cancer uncontrollably spreads throughout the body, they set up colonies from which they consume insatiably the resources while proclaiming the fairy tale that God gave them the right to do so. that is, to civilize or exterminate any opposition. As we used to say back in the 80s, they are undisguised devils. Remember that, Rahh? Whom suffer from, as Rahh would put it, mental masturbation, telling themselves that they have the world by the hand, when in fact, all they had was a handful of themselves. This fact is the great disease of humanity, and their ongoing projection of white supremacy is viewed by them as a defense mechanism. Let me say that again. They view their projection of white supremacy as a defense mechanism, whereas people of color seek only equality. And that brings us right to what Omar was talking about with the struggle for equity and diversity, inclusion, etc. It's always been about equality. So we only seek equality. The Chinese are never, and the Indians, they never come out. They just want to be equal. So in seeking equality, if it happened, they called it, when we seek equality, they call it an invasion. They inherently recognize that without melanin, they are inferior and deformed. So they project the very opposite. To them, they are morally justified in utilizing preemptive violence with any and all weapons they can artifice in order to preserve themselves. Let me say that one again. To them, to white people, to white supremacists, they are morally justified in utilizing preemptively violence with any and all weapons that they can artifice in order to preserve themselves, which is common amongst all species of life. We people of color must recognize and accept this fact of nature accordingly. Until now, we haven't recognized it. We only look for equality. But white people see equality for the world as them being unequal to the rest of the world because they lack melanin. So we got to look at it from their point of view, because we've been asking them for equality, trying to pass legislation, pass laws, and et cetera, et cetera. So we must, all of us, accept this fact, which is common amongst all species of life. The first rule of life on earth is self-preservation, period. Whites feel that they have to be true to their skins in order that they preserve themselves. After all, we must remember that they came into being as Africans, caught in the throes of a decades-long deep freeze, which forced them to inbreed as a defense mechanism against extinction. Self-preservation is the first rule of life on earth. The world we live in is a world of color. An albino creature, plant, or animal born in this world has a natural disadvantage. White deflects sunlight. Dark or black absorbs sunlight. The absorption of sunlight is the source of energy for all living things. It is the fuel of life. Anyone or anything that has a diminished capacity for this absorption must resort to outbreeding as a method, or mutation, or outbreeding as a method of compensation, or they must produce artificial means of appearing equal. White people are demonstrably master artificers. The weapons they produce against the world of color, they call the great equalizers. These weapons are deployed by them against everything natural. Nature itself is their greatest enemy because nature is the ruler of a world of color. White people, when they commit mass murder, event to the point of genocide, see it as self-preservation. This is a vital fact that until now, people of color have failed to understand. Whereas we all only seek equality, inclusion, or objective in life, white people seek white supremacy as a necessity for preserving their understand that the malady can be overcome by simple miscegenation, that the offspring of such couplings would be loved equally as much as any deformed children. Yet, despite this most obvious solution, they continue to like and prefer the idea of white supremacy. They constantly project this notion of white Christian nationalism as a product of God's will, even when it can be indisputably shown that the idea of God was invented by them just about 2,000 years ago. Their Christianity, which many people of color ignorantly embrace, is the primary and the all encompassing origin of racism because it projects a white male God as being superior to nature, that is, superior to even the sun and the universe beyond. This is a bizarre notion, and the more it is called out as such, the more its followers, the fanatics that they are, its followers proclaim that it seems bizarre and fanciful because the God that they worship is mystically, magically above the comprehension of mere mortals. Our people are immersed in these concepts because we've been unable to teach them the truth except in diminutive meetings such as this one. Our struggle to inform by a society totally controlled and operated by white supremacists has been going on for centuries. We in the diaspora and in many places on our continent itself labor under systems designed and controlled by white men. On the continent of Africa, for example, the political system still in place today in numerous so-called nations were all installed by the European white mutations during colonization and used as a prerequisite for granting independence. The current borders of every so-called nation in Africa were imposed during their Berlin Conference in 1884. No native, their purpose did not consider the Europeans purposely did not consider the extended family or the tribal cultures of each community, which was headed by a chief or obe who was totally responsible to the safety and welfare of the village, all its members, and its territory. A natural system whereby intertribal differences or disputes were settled by a council of elders in each community. This system was purposely usurped and undermined in order to keep Africa weak, divided, corruptible, and exploitable, which in many places, truth and fact, equips us with the wherewithal to take the first steps towards repatriation. From the end of the Civil War, the end of slavery through Reconstruction, the KKK terrorism, and all of the thousands of lynchings and police killings which continue today, the two world war, the civil rights movement, and the hundreds of marches and demonstrations against segregation and racial inequality, the decolonization and then the neo-colonization of our homelands, the establishment of Black and African Studies Department in many universities, we have sought and been consistently denied equal rights in America. It is long past time for us to understand and accept that equality granted by white supremacy will never happen because it isn't a political problem at all. It's a biological problem. It cannot be legislated out of existence because it's a biological, genetic problem. The term white supremacy is self-explanatory. It means ignoring morality, fairness, common sense, honesty, the golden rule, truth, and human nature itself in order to declare themselves above and in charge of all things on this earth. We people of color, now equipped with knowledge of self and knowledge of history, must endeavor to separate from these mutations. First rule of nature, that is self-preservation. We must return to our homelands. This is a natural for any lost or abducted child. And then together with our ancestral cousins, aunts, uncles, brothers, and sisters, reestablish our own natural cultures and care for one another. Our demands for reparations will probably be as futile as were our demands for equality. So with or without them, we must go home. Africa is awakening from the scourge of neo-colonization. Many of them are begging for our returns. Reparations, if they are granted, must be applied to this movement of repatriation. It was in kidnapping and murdering and forcing us into a lifelong labor so they can get rich. That was their whole purpose. So if you're going to ask reparations, it's logical that they should return the children of Africa back to Africa and pay for it, for the services and the lives that we've sacrificed for them, for their sake. So let repatriation be our great objective. Let's go home and make our homes naturally great again. And that's my statement. So these are the thoughts, and it comes ironically after we talked about the very issue that we've been trying to reach for all of these years, 500 years in diaspora here in America. And it's never going to happen because it's a biological problem. And you can't change that biology. If all of them recognize that this problem is biological, it's easy to change it. Just inbreed with Black people, but people of color, and then they become people of color. And like I say, they're not going to, they will love their children of such unions as much as they love the ones with that they produce already. So that's not the problem. The problem is that people like you see with this president, this Donald Trump, and all of these idiots that he's surrounding himself with, all of them racist. I mean, and the worst of racists. And they like the idea of white supremacy. They like the power. They like the dictatorial control over everybody. You understand that? That's the problem. It's not that the solution is there. It's obvious the solution. But how do you get them to relinquish what they are enjoying, which is the power and the control over people of color? And I don't think it's going to happen. We've been struggling for all this time trying to get them to do that. And where has it gotten us? You know, where has it gotten? Even when some compassion or understanding is displayed by them, like, for example, Clarence Thomas went through affirmative action in order to enter Yale Law School. And now he's a Supreme Court justice. And he's voted against every progressive movement to help Black people or people of color or poor people. All of them, every single one. You know, he in many senses is worse than Donald Trump, you know, because he was born poor and Black, whereas the Trump was born rich and white and doesn't understand what it's like to be Black. But this guy does. But that's another story. We ain't gonna talk about it. But this guy, because of the same DEI program, which then was called affirmative action, has become what he's become. And then look at him, you know. And too many of our brothers who take advantage of the system that includes them turn and ended up voting for Donald Trump. Look at the Latino males, the 50 whatever voted for Donald Trump. 54%, more than half of them. You imagine that? I mean, the idiocy is just, but that's another story. My point is to say, look, we've been at this for 500 years. It's time to go home. Africa's just starting to realize what neo-colonialism is doing. It's draining all the resources, setting up all these corrupt leaders who don't care nothing about the people. They're living, trying to develop nations, which were, the boundaries were set up by Europeans. Little tiny small nation was separated and lines drawn right down the middle of the traditional territories, and splitting people apart, and then sending weapons and instigating, you know, like the signifying monkey, instigating conflict between Black people against Black. Look what Sudan today and Congo and other places, setting up meanwhile, they come in with solutions in order offer pittances of solutions in order so they can extract all of the minerals and materials and whatever else. And even in Africa, when I was in Ghana, all of the brightest students who graduated from the university there in both Cape Coast and in the capital. See what I mean about forgetting words? They all wanted to go to Europe, to the United States, to Canada, you know, all of them. There was no one that I ever met who said, well, I want to go to China. To Germany, to Spain. And they are today. That's where they are. It's time. I'm glad for Traore there in Burkina Faso and Mali, where I stayed in Mali for quite a while, and in Niger, because they're waking up. Ghana president is saying to African Americans, come. But trust me, I've been to Ghana. I lived there for years. You cannot just go. You got to understand that the system in Africa, the way you get things done is through the family, the extended family. Now, well, I don't know about that, but my cousin might know. And if you don't know, he got a cousin who might know, etc. That's how things were done in the past. And that's how things get done. They
Bro.
still wear them in Canada at all the courts. Man, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's time for us to go home and not just go haphazardly. We need to organize, not only here in this country, but in the continent as well, and make sure that we are reintroduced into the cultures of Africa. We have to learn. We have to go there with as students in the first grade because we don't know the culture, we don't know the languages, we don't know the, the temperature, the systems that are in place. All of these things must be learned. When I went and lived in Ghana, in Accra for years, and then Cape Coast, and then in Mali and Senegal, I learned one thing. You have to be a part of the family system. A family has to accept you as someone that they can teach and learn from. It is an exchange. And that is what can be the basis for reestablishing the greatness that Africa once was, is we who have learned so much about this monster, this devil, know how to treat and how to respond to whatever they bring to us. As long as we have the backing of our people, our family, extended family, and we're in our own lands where we're not controlled by this neo-colonialism or these white people as in America. Because never going to achieve equality in a community where whites are the majority, and indeed sometimes when they're not even the majority. As long as they have control, they're never going to relinquish that, because to make the playing field level, which is equality, means that they will be inferior because they lack melanin. It's that simple. So that's my thoughts. That
All
should
right.
be a new
All
objective.
right. Brother He, you have any response?
Yes, brother. Um, brother, I think that yes, we definitely, as part of the African diaspora, need to make that connection with our land of our ancestors and forefathers, and need to have access. W.E. Du Bois put a number up there, how many of our forefathers died in the transatlantic slave trade coming to the Americas, and it was more than 100 million. And this is no disrespect to the people who were here when we got here, when we were kidnapped and brought here, the same people who were almost eliminated, genocide committed against them also. But if the white man gonna stay in this land, I feel like the Africans should, the people who developed this part of the world, should be able to stay here also. And I think the culture that we developed here, which is the #1 followed culture in the world, gives us some value. It was created here on these lands, and we have as much right to a part of these Americas as any other human species. Give us our own. We want to take our own. And it can be here. We don't have to go across the waters. The Africans are already here. Our ancestors died and developed this land. And if anybody got a right to the land, we got a right to this land. So I agree with you in that we should have dual citizenships, that we should be able to go home and we should know the land of our ancestors. But we have died and lived here and thrived here, for lack of a better word, thrive, for 300 years plus 500 years. So on that part of your argument, I can't agree totally. but I can appreciate what you're saying. I love Africa. The short time that I was there in just a few countries, I felt the connection with my ancestors and my forefathers, and the people were generally very kind to me. And I'm considering doing just what you said. But I don't get it twisted. I'll be coming back here regularly. So that and the fact that, you know, Thomas and all the rest of these Sambos, we've always had those. We've had in the war between the states, you had enslaved people standing right there, arm in arm with their masters, fighting to remain enslaved. We've had people who have been liberated walk back to slavery. We've always had Sambos, but we'll deal with them like we'll deal with them. We got them now. Look at the people who just threw their body in front of Trump in the mud so that he can step on them on his way to the presidency, and he didn't even toss him a towel or something to clean off. So, I'm with you there, but we always had those. So those are the 2 points that stood out with me. That's just my view on our people and the right to this land, and also having access to El Kibulan, all people of the African diaspora. All right. Thank you, brother, for coming.
Jubal, you want to respond?
Yeah, understand your thinking, your thoughts, but we've been at it for 500 years. Why should we stay here? I mean, really, what do we hope to achieve? We don't.
I'm not talking about under
their
their power. I'm not talking about under them. I'm talking about our own land in the Americas.
So what is your plan for that? The logical plan for that. Come on. You think that'll ever happen? Or really? How many of us would strive to achieve something like that and die needlessly? Because we've been trying our own for 500 years. And where have we gotten us? We're in the same battle today in this country, seeking equality that we sought when we first were brought here. It hasn't changed.
One would have thought that reparations would never come about, but the first steps have started with those also.
Reparations don't mean nothing. Repatriation means everything. If somebody breaks in your house and steals one of your children, you won't rest until your child comes home. I mean, that's just natural. And then plus, we have to understand, I feel the same way. I grew up feeling the same way as you do. And most Black people in this country feel that way. But it's not going to happen because, like I mentioned, and I can't emphasize it enough, these people they prefer white supremacy. They're never going to offer equality because it's biologically they are not equal to people of color, and they know
brother,
it.
We understand that, but riddle me this: going back to El Kibulan, the biggest problem on the continent now is tribalism. That is the biggest problem facing our brothers and sisters over there. Now we're coming as the descendants of the enslaved people from the Americas. And even now with our experience, now I'd much rather deal with them than deal with these devils over here. We're looked at as an opportunity. I'll just put it out there because of that American dollar, which creates other problems. So in each equation, there are some difficult variables to solve. And it is, in my belief, reasonable to expect, even if it's organically, to get our own country in the Americas.
Why? We don't control this place. Look.
Africa didn't control Africa, and look what's happening.
Look, for example, at all of the recent immigration to the Americas. Black and brown people from all over the world, from Africa, from South America, from China even, coming here. For what? None of them expect to have their own land. They don't control it. And then when this devil is ready, what's he going to do? He turns on them and treats them just like he feels they are, like little cockroaches who just in the way. That's how they treat us. The other day, I stepped on a little tiny roach and I thought immediately about what's going on in Palestine, because that is the mentality of the Israelites. And that is the same mentality that you find of white supremacy right here in this country. They don't care nothing about you black, brown people. You think you're going to get your own land in this continent? We had this land. What happened to all of those people? I listed how many? 4 pages of various families, tribes who were murdered, exterminated, and by these Europeans as they took this land. You think now they're going to give it up? No, they're not. And in Africa, where all of these conflicts, the further you trace these conflicts back, the more you find the same devil has created this problem. In the first place, by imposing those barriers and borders and calling this country a country when it's not. And creating all of this tribal conflict amongst our people. We need to go there and explain what's going on and join in with the people with this objective of reestablishing African unity. You're not going to find it in the Americas. You're not going to find it in the Americas. Why? Because it's run by white people. They got the guns. They got the tanks, the police, the government. You think they're going to give you even an inch? No, they never have. Why would they do it now? When China, look at them, how they react to China. Why? China has never threatened any one of these Western countries, not one time. They forced China even to buy opium, which they took out of Pakistan, Afghanistan, and forced the Chinese to buy it. Just think, China has never assaulted in any way any of these white countries. And yet, in the beginning of World War II, there was 13 European, including the U.S., there trying to colonize and break up China into different colonies. Why are they afraid today of the Chinese? Huh? You would think, well, China is booming. They're our partners. They're our biggest trading partner, one of them. You should join with them and create prosperity for everybody. But no, hell no. The Chinese are people of color. It's that simple. That's the reason why they would constantly denigrate China, call them, man, when I was in the military, I went to China with all them redneck shipmates. Call them slope heads and chinks and slant eyes, and the names were incredible. But anyway, the reason that they rebel and consider China their enemy, even though China's never done nothing to the US, is because they're people of color. It's that simple. These white supremacists want world domination. Without it, they are nothing. It's just like the NBA. Back in 1948-49, when I was just beginning to pick up the ball, there wasn't a black man in the NBA. Now, well, I don't even need to say it, do I? I don't even need to say it, do I? In the 60s, the guy got kicked out of the, I think it was ESPN, one of them, broadcasting the NFL game, because he said that blacks can run the ball, but they can't quarterback. Look at the NFL today. Hello. You see, a level playing field, they know they cannot dominate because they lack that third eye, that melanin. That makes the difference, and they know it. What have black people ever done to them in this country? Think about it. They enslaved and raped, mutilated and lynched, and man, you can go down the list. Today, the prisons are filled with black and brown people, even today. These people are not going to ever give equality because it makes them inferior. Then they project that inferior by claiming themselves as being supreme. White supremacy. That's what it is. The God of Jehovah, whatever they want to call him, is a white man. Yeah. Come on.
Yeah.
You can't stay here and develop nothing as long as they control the law, and then control the police, control the army. And trust me right now, this fanatic that they got in the White House now is going to turn these police right now against all these brown people and Asian people. And when they finish with them, they coming for us. Okay. Because we, more than anyone else, is who they really want to wipe out. Because we blacker than the Asian and the Mexicans.
All right. All right. Kuumba, you have a comment before you leave?
First, as always, good seeing my brother Jubal. And I think the part that I most resonate with is the investing in Africa and looking at Africa as a place for that dual citizenship, as well as different parts of the Caribbean. The Caribbean, there's opportunities within the Caribbean. There's opportunities in different parts of South America. And I think having that dual citizenship, and when I was giving my comments about DEI, is also not just looking in the United States, but also looking global. I wasn't able to hear everything my good brother was saying because there was some disconnection on my end. But the parts I heard about the international part of how do we invest, and I have good friends of mine that are expats in Portugal. And for some of the same reasons that Jubal was talking about in regards to feeling like this concept of where I feel like I can be somewhat free and be able to do some of the things I want to do and be my authentic self without feeling like I am being abused simply because I'm Black. So I think we have to look at the global stage as a part of economic freedom. And so that we can have those options if things turn away in this country where it's just not able to be livable in some capacity. That's it.
Yeah. What about you, Mr. Ernest? Any comment?
Well, on the comment, because when I used to listen to Malcolm X, in the 50s, kind of along the same lines of what he's talking about. Malcolm was saying the same thing, but I always thought about the experience I had with the African guys for the airlines that came over here. They were from Zaire at that time, and then later it went back to Congo. But, you know, they basically told me, well, Ernie, you guys, no offense, but you guys are mongrels. You're not real blacks. You know, but I was a little bit offended, but then I didn't let that bother me. But in the meantime, I've been tracing my own DNA and found out I'm from the Fula people in Guyana-Bissau, from the Mende tribe in Sierra Leone, and the Mandinkas and Dinkas in Senegal, and the Capelli tribe in Liberia. So I wouldn't know where would I go, you know, if I did go to Africa or leave this country. You
Good
know, I
point.
wouldn't really have nowhere to go. So, but that's all I had to say, kind of.
What about you, Rashaki?
Well, all interesting points. I know that by us being participants in this system and taking on the ways of the white man is something that we need to really look at. This is why we do the programs we do, because we must change our thinking, because if you're thinking about, I mean, if you're taking on the ways, and I said this a few times before, if you're taking on the ways of your oppressor, that's you're being worse than your oppressor, if I'm doing mathematics. So, you know, just like Professor Roddy said, don't let your oppressor be a teacher. That's been the case for a long time. Even when Jubal's talking about the religion, you know, you take a religion, don't make no sense at all, but you're trying to make sense of it. So it's mentality also that's involved. Yes, going back to Africa is a great thing that I think that people should consider, and then also dual citizenship. So it's very interesting, and and uh, and I concur about these people in their objective. It has never changed. Has never changed. So yeah, we an alternative way of living and being should be a #1 priority of people who have some type of thought process. So yeah, I'm with what most of you are saying, but you know, I just can't get with the program that's been presented to us, and so we definitely have to change mentally. Appreciate everybody that's on here.
Let me just say this right quick. And Jubal, you can make the concluding remarks. It's a lot more work has to go into repatriation. A lot more statistics, a lot more studies, not just here, but abroad. There are many Black people, American citizens that have moved to Africa. There's a lot of them that have moved into different parts of Africa. Geronimo Pratt moved to Africa. Du Bois moved to Africa. I mean, those are just primary names, but there are a lot of other people that have made that journey. It's not a significant amount, but they stayed. There are people living in St. Croix, in the islands, have moved to islands to get away from this country, have relocated in different Caribbean countries. They're already doing it, some of them, at a small amount. We have a problem because repatriation, not only as Jubal was saying, and he was saying that you can't solve a physical problem with a political or judicial system. And he's correct. If our problem with white folks is our physiological composition and our kinesiology and physiology, then and genetics, then you can't solve that politically or with laws or asking people to behave. You either punish people or reward them for behavior because you can't regulate people's behavior and you can't change attitude. Many African Americans here are acculturated. They're comfortable in their oppression. They are very comfortable. As a matter of fact, they are so comfortable, they don't even think that they're oppressed. You understand? And then you got a lot of people that of African descent that see themselves not as white as black. They don't see American and white as synonymous. They say, I'm an American, even though they don't get the justice that white Americans get. And so, but they still see themselves, and they sang the Star Spangled Banner better than the people that wrote it. They pledge allegiance better than the people that wrote it. And they're not going to give up their religious acculturation that's based upon white domination, because they don't see it as white domination. They just see it as a God that's going to make life after death. And then they have family that they're buried traditionally, going back to great-great-grandparents. They have invested a lot in this country, not just building it, but their roots, as far as they're concerned, are here. You understand? They don't want to leave the country because they have invested dearly in it, not only with their work and being exploited, but also with their tradition and cultural apparatus that links them to the country, not just by civil rights or proclamation of Emancipation Proclamation, but because their family and culture, their family and their tradition is invested here. You understand? And they learn, and I mean, being acculturated is not something like just a mental thing. It's spiritual and physical. You understand? Because they see white men marrying black women. They see black men marrying white women. They see Latinos marrying blacks and whites and stuff. And that's okay in urban areas, cities. But in rural areas, you don't see that. White folks got schools that only whites go to. I mean, they were designed, just like what Jubal was saying about the NBA, all their major colleges were predominantly white. And there's over about close to 750,000 upper division educational institutions. And 80% of them are all white. 80% of them are all white. And when you go around to the different states, when you get up into Oregon, Montana, Wyoming, you don't even have to go that far. Just go to Santa Barbara in California. 1% black. Go to St. Louis Obispo. 1% black. The only majority of black people is in the prison. And that's why the other black people live there to see their family, or they're going to college at St. Louis Obispo. That's the only reason they're there. They weren't born there. You know, some of them were born there nowadays, but I mean, I just want you to understand a whole geographical study. And then at the same time, you say dual citizenship, all the Europeans have to say is, we don't allow it. We don't allow dual citizenship. That's going to spook everybody. There you go, if I can say I'm dual, in case I want to come back. But when the white man passed a law saying, well, all y'all leaving, you cannot leave here unless you give up your citizenship and then become a citizenship somewhere else. Second, you got countries in Africa that have offered land. They have offered Ghana offered land. Other parts of Africa have offered land for repatriation. And some blacks have done that. But you got to go there, as Jubal say, not and join in with the people, get to know the people, get to work with the people and learn their culture. You want to bring your problems from America here? No. They know what to do with Crips and Blood. They know what to do. They don't want that stuff. You understand? The corruption, stealing, hustling, pimping. Oh no, that mentality, no. You got the, it's only going to be a small minority that repatriate. The majority of them are locked in. They're locked in. They join the service. They pay their dues. And when you join the service, you're saying, I'll die for you. That's what you telling the white man. I'll die for you. You own me. You tell me when to get up. You tell me when to go fight. You tell me when to, I mean, I train you. I drill you to die for me. And he pledged that. You understand? That's a deep thing, man. I mean, we say we're going there to get the education, the GI Bill, and get this and get that. That's fine if there ain't no war. But if it's a war, you're going to fight for this country. So anyway, Jubal, close us out.
Yeah, that was well spoken, well spoken. You know, I don't expect most Black Americans, 90% plus, to be even considering that move. But what I'm saying is we should form organizations with the intent of educating our children and grandchildren to move back to the continent where we belong. We're not born native to this continent controlled by the white people. Most of us still carry the names of our slave masters. I mean, look into your own and see, you know, this is how much we're controlled. We need to change that mentality because white people, as I said, they're never going to give you equality. It's not going to happen. And when they get somebody who is a white supremacist fascist idiot like the one they got now in the White House, then you watch. He'll turn on these brown and yellow people and force them out, and some Black people as well. And then sooner as the military as immigration agents to set up checkpoints all over this country looking for changing the police into militaries, checkpoints at this road or that junction or whatever, and want to see your ID, etc., etc. Sooner or later, this is going to become a police state. And when that happens, who do you think their main victims are going to be? The same one that's always been us Africans. So we need to start protecting our children by teaching them, look, go home. Home is where we should be. Why are we here? We didn't immigrate to this place. And all you might be, optimistically looking to benefit financially, but that's not going to do it for all of our people. You cannot be an individual. That's the whole problem with the white system. It's a system of individuals, whereas in Africa, it's a system of the collective. Yeah, Africa's been ruined, destroyed a great bit by the colonizing Europeans who killed off all of the spiritual leaders in the communities and then put in the missionaries to replace them, and then impose these neo-colonial government, the same European systems and ideals. But the Europeans are waking up, and we need to correspond and wake up ourselves at the same time and start building organizations, not only here in the diaspora, but on the continent that'll start. Their objective is to bring us home and to teach us the culture and to shuck off all of these European ideas, to get rid of all these corrupt leaders, especially in the continent. There's a lot of them. And this is what we need to eject it, get it out of there, and then go home. Why would we stay here? Why would we stay here? Calling ourselves Montgomery, calling ourselves Palmer, Brown. There's some of them even call ourselves Whitehead, for crying out loud. Come on, let's start, at least make this our objective. We need to go home, not maybe you and me or in person, but our children, our grandchildren, our great grandchildren. We need to start moving towards leaving this place because we've been fighting this war for 500 years and it's not going to change because, as I can't say enough, it is not a political problem. No matter how much money, how many degrees a black man get, to them, he's just another nigger. And trust me, that's how they act. And that's what they mean. They will never, never grant you equality. Never. Just accept that. And then go home. You in trouble, you go home. Everybody does. That's all I have
The
to
only
say.
problem, Jubal, and Rashaki gonna tell us what's gonna be on tomorrow. Because most people think they're free and think they got justice. That's a hard thing to do under the cultural apparatus. They think it's that oppression and abuse is okay. Yeah, I mean, you know, as long as you just, long as I can just, you know, go to Jack in the Box, order pizza, and watch a movie and shoot pool and play around and go to the beach and things of this nature, I'm free. You understand? I love this country. You know, I ain't gonna leave it, so. But go ahead, Rashaki, and close us on out. Tell us about tomorrow. But Jamal, we get you back.
Okay.
I got some more to get on that repatriation. It's not as easy as people think. We've
I
had
know
back
it's
to
not
Africa
easy.
movement.
It's
We've
not
had a
easy.
bunch of back to African music going all the way back.
Hey,
to
man,
emancipation.
we are,
Eric
in fact,
Blyden and all of them, all the garbage
hey,
movement was first go back for economic reasons and then repatriate.
yeah,
All of that, you understand?
yes.
And then they set up black people to be neo-colonialists, and then the people overthrow them. And then
Yeah.
them brothers sometimes get corrupted for the needs of by the economics, man. You got rich, you got some in Nigeria,
Yeah.
like billionaires, billionaires
Yeah.
that the European has made.
Yeah.
You understand? But anyway, go ahead, Rashaki.
Mind control.
Yeah.
Mind control. Most definitely. Tomorrow we have Brother Damian McCalman. And I encourage people to come tomorrow because it's an interactive program. And we're going to be engaging with him. So that should be very, very interesting, just like this evening. Very interesting. So I appreciate everybody being here. Teach one, and Conscious Corner. Continue to have a good day, folks.
I see y'all later.
Tutanada.